Our guest today is Tina Akinmade from CW Jobs, who's had a really varied and creative career from journalism to teaching and now is working in UX design research. So, welcome to Tina.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here and share my story. So I work for Total Jobs Group and CW Jobs are a part of that. So I'm just going to take you through kind of my experience, my journey into this. I will ask some questions and there'll be time at the end for you to ask me questions about UX specifically. So so feel free to post whatever it is you have on your mind and I'll try my best to get through them all. So like I said, I work and I support a number of job boards under kind of one network, and we're all aligned, with the same vision, same mission, which is helping everyone find the right job. And for me, what that means as a researcher, it means really trying to take the time to understand the different needs. So the different needs we have of job seekers. So as you can see with the example I've got here of kind of the different boards I support, that might be looking into the needs of a particular industry. So for CW Jobs, it's understanding the tech industry. But for caterers, for example, that might be understanding hospitality. And so my role is really interesting because, no day's the same. I really do have to consider what it means to support everyone. And that's a really exciting thing to do and a rewarding one as well. So a little bit about me, and I will go into my story in a bit more detail later, but I did study English at university with the view to go into journalism. But somewhere along the way, I decided to go into education and I became and qualified as a secondary school teacher. I taught from 11 to 18-year-olds, so I taught GCSEs as well as A-levels. And then an opportunity came up and that allowed me to teach abroad, which was great. So I kind of spent some years abroad and then decided to come back to the UK and changed careers and ended up in UX, and I've been in this space for 5 years. A personal side here, I do have 2 kids, which I call monsters, and I know that confuses people because they think I'm talking about pets, but yeah, definitely kids, which I adore. But that's me as an introduction, and I'm really interested in hearing a bit about you. So if you could use the comments and tell me, just introduce yourself, let me know what you're studying. I would like to kind of see the range of courses we have here. Yeah, and in addition to what you're studying, let me know what interests you about tech. Quite interested in them. I'll try and kind of keep that in mind as I'm taking you through my journey and think about any tips that I think might be useful to you. Nice, international business and relation. That's really great. A software engineer, we have that. We've got languages as well. Big data, very nice. It's really good actually to see that you're kind of thinking about the things that you're interested in now, because I will touch on that as well. And if you're not sure, that's fine as well. Just wait and see if we've got any more coming up in the comments. That's a very interesting one. That's a topic I'm looking into now around accessibility. Okay, so we do have some interest in UX research and product management. Lovely. Really good to see, and I'm really happy to see a range as well. And feel free to kind of consider exploring and start looking into those areas that you're interested in now. Like accessibility, whether it's big data. There are things you can do now to just start, whether it's reading or kind of looking into how you can set up projects yourself. Yeah, it's really great to start. And so for me, actually, when I was at university, I didn't really think about tech. I mean, other than the devices I was using, I had no idea. It was not something I really considered as definitely as a profession. I would have described myself as a creative person, and definitely wanted to stay creative within my approach. But when I chose to study English, I was actually quite intentional, because I saw it as something, one, I enjoyed, I loved, I was good at school. It was my favorite subject. I enjoyed reading as well as writing. And I happened to be doing a number of things on the side that helped me utilize those skills. But I also saw English as something very broad. And I also kind of, I did like part-time like acting, drama school. And so that was also an option that I was considering. So my plan was, I'll do English at university. I'll kind of follow the path to go into journalism, still pursue my creative interests with acting and drama on the side, and then we'll see where things take me. And and being quite intentional about having this open approach meant that I had to start testing early, and that's what I did. So I took internships, I had work placements. After I finished university, I took a project to launch a magazine for an awards company. And that was all really great, because what I was doing was learning. And I found that as much as there were parts I did like, there were also parts that I couldn't see myself doing, full time or doing in the long run. And while I had been doing some of those projects, I'd happened to work with a lot of young people, or I was mentoring. And I actually enjoyed that. I found that I worked really well in that space, and I looked into education. And it was kind of a no-brainer for me that I would focus on English. And so I did my teacher's qualification, and went on to teach English. I did teach a bit of media as well. And as you're doing that, I'm really still always, and I still do this now, assessing, where am I at right now? Like, what am I learning? How does this align to kind of my goals? Am I still enjoying it? And for teaching, there wasn't, I guess there wasn't anything that made me feel, hey, no, it's time to leave. But when the opportunity did come to kind of, let's go abroad, that was something I had wanted to do. Like, I wanted to travel, I wanted to learn about different cultures. And then I ended up going to Abu Dhabi, and I stayed there for about 2.5 years, still teaching secondary school level, and still teaching English as a subject, and not as a second additional language. And it was fun. But after I had my first child, it was kind of time to come back home, to be around family. But I had to now decide whether I wanted to still do that. And I think the thing for me at that point was, I had a really nice work-life balance abroad. And that was something I didn't have in the UK. And now I have a little person that I have to look after. I just couldn't work out how I'd still give the level of kind of, the intensity that teaching took from me, while still kind of giving all that support and all the attention to a new baby. So I knew that actually I'm going to have to leave teaching, even if it was, for a short time. But I was interested in, what do I do? And I find that, being a researcher in, looking at people who are trying to look for jobs, or trying to enter new markets, there's always this kind of assessment piece that people do. And it's like, what do I do now? What skills do I have? Where else can I use the skills that I've, acquired? And I did the same thing, but I was actually very strategic about it. I did list things out, I Google searched, and I just thought about things that sounded interesting. And because I didn't have a clear idea of the job titles I would be looking at, I just started to focus on the job descriptions, and I would look at adverts and look for keywords and phrases that stood out to me. And that's actually how I discovered this educational technology company, because they were looking for someone that was familiar with education and can use those insights in this particular role, which is, something I could have done. But there were also some areas that I wasn't familiar with, and that's okay. And I took the risk anyway and applied for the job, and I got it. And it's actually, that was my first introduction into what a tech organization looked like. There was lots of roles that I hadn't heard of before, but I was now coming into contact, working with these people, understanding and having a clearer insight to what they did. And so the role I started off with wasn't the role I ended up in. And it just meant that as I got in there and I was learning more and more, I was able to, like leverage kind of the skills that I had, but use the new ones as well, and then work on them both kind of in the role, but also externally as well. And just an example of kind of how I was doing that, it was, reading, which for me is easy. It's something I like to do, but I would get books, I would go online, read blogs, follow people that were in this space and learn from them. And I was also quite physical about like attending meetups, just so I could soak all that information up. And that helped me kind of progress to my next role in that company and onto a further role within that same company, until I kind of really did, I was operating in the UX space completely and understanding kind of the different components of that role. So just looking at kind of like some of the comments that you have, it definitely feels like maybe some of you are really aware of kind of the industry, and you might have done your research, but based on kind of our research, CW Jobs research, we were seeing kind of the insight that actually the tech industry is a resilient one. We know that we're currently in this pandemic, and everyone is being affected, and the industries are taking hard hits, but we are seeing that the tech industry is bouncing back, and we're more and more people are considering going into tech. And I think what's really happened here is that being in this situation, a lot of people are forced to rethink what it is that they want to do, how they want to work. So, for my example, I was going into the office like daily, and now I've had to kind of like work at home, with kids homeschooling downstairs, and so people are thinking, well, actually, if I can do this, is this the way I like to work? Some jobs aren't, they're not easily like transferable like that. We can't just kind of move from the office to a home setting. So yeah, people are at that point of reflection. I think we all are. But it's nice to see that people have considered that like tech seems to be a great alternative or a great choice. 22% of all workers, from the people that we asked, are taking online tech courses. They're willing to skill up and to kind of create that route. And I think entry routes are important. So thinking about like the way you enter. So for some of us, it might be that we've taken a degree in a particular field, and that's kind of the entry point, that's the experience. But there's still an assessment piece there to do. You still got to consider the types of companies you want to work for, the areas that you're most passionate about, maybe the values that you have and you would like to align with, and so that company matches with yours. And a lot of people are doing this, but tech is definitely an industry that can support that, and people are turning to, which is really good to see. So just turning this back to you, one of the things I think from my journey is kind of transferable skills. It's the thing that when I'm sitting down and I'm assessing, okay, which way to go to next, I do have to consider like my skill set. I have to be kind of very honest with myself about what I'm capable and what I'm able to do and what I can demonstrate. So in the world of work, a lot of it is like, when you're putting your CVs together, when you're in an interview, it's what you can demonstrate, what you can show that you can do. And the way you want to do that is obviously have examples of these skills. But what we're seeing, I know it might be easier when you talk about hard skills, it's if I know how to program, that's kind of maybe easier to show. But what about kind of our soft skills, which we kind of call our transferable skills? And there is a place for that, in tech as well. So just a question to you, of the following skills that I have on this slide, which three do you think were most desired in tech? So this is based on a CW research. So I want you to kind of just have a guess. If you were looking at this, what do you think? What top three here would be for you kind of best placed in tech? We got teamwork. Okay, so Elsie says teamwork, time management, leadership. Okay, we've got problem solving, communication, teamwork. Right, so we've got problem solving coming up a few, we've got teamwork coming up. And while we just wait for some more responses to come in, I think it's a good one to do, like have that assessment kind of where you sit and what skills you have. I think it's good to develop the full range and to have a full range of skills. And if you feel that you are maybe stronger with most, stronger with some, and weaker there, there's always opportunities to develop them. But I will let you know, and I can reveal that according to our research into career changes into tech, what was actually highlighted were the top three there. So problem solving, teamwork, and analytical skills. And I know a number of people had said teamwork and problem solving came up, which is really good to see. But yes, analytical skills there. Maria put that as one of her choice. But to be honest, I think there's a place for all of these skills, and it really does depend on like the role that you are getting into. But I think when we think of problem solving, people often describe the world of tech as that is the place, that's what you're there to do in whichever capacity. And as for me as a researcher, yes, I'm in that journey. I'm a part of that process to solve problems. I'm probably also a problem finder. As a researcher, I have to kind of do the research and understand the current landscape and bring that back into the organization so that a number of people can come together to solve that problem. But we almost need to know what problems to solve, and that's definitely where I come in. But I guess with this, it's really just important to highlight this as well, and maybe not necessarily feel like it's just about the hard skills and that you have, and more teams and more organizations do want to see that you're able to do this and able to reflect this. So a bit about my area. So, I talk about being a UX researcher, and you might find actually that if you have a scan of the market and job ads, people change titles, and there are variations of that. So you might not see a UX designer and it might be called a product designer, but you read the job ad and it's the same thing. We're dealing with the same thing. And when we talk about UX, we mean user experience. And what that is here is like the process of understanding how people engage, how they kind of engage and respond to your product. It could be a service or a system, but you're really interested in the emotional connections people are having and how they feel. And in the ideal world, you want them to feel great about your product. You want to make sure that you are helping them do what it is that they want to do. But it isn't as easy as it seems, and it's not something that we should take lightly or assume. And so the roles we have in UX are definitely there to kind of make sure that the decisions that we're making, they're informed decisions. So they're based on as much information as possible. They're also based on, like the thoughts and the feelings of the people we're serving. So it should never really be, oh, I feel this particular way, therefore let's do. It's, we've heard or we've seen, and that's really reflecting and looking over kind of the insights that are coming from our users and our customers. So here's some examples of roles. UX designers, which most people are familiar with. UI designers tend to focus more on kind of the front end, so kind of that's the visual aspects of things. They might look at the layout, fonting style, things like that. You might find that some roles call for kind of a hybrid role, so where you might have to do both. But often I tend to find that there's usually like the expertise. So yes, I might be able to do some UI, but my real strength lies in UX. And then us as researchers, we in my world, so within my team, we do both quantitative research and qualitative research. When we're looking at the qualitative stuff, we're talking about our user interviews. We're doing contextual inquiry, observations. There's a full range. But on the quantitative side, we might be also putting out surveys to validate kind of the patterns or the things that we've heard in an interview or the things that we've seen. But again, you might find that people will call themselves one or the other. So I'm a qualitative researcher versus a quantitative researcher. And that's just them highlighting maybe their preference or their strength. UX writer, so again, you want to make sure kind of like what we're saying to our users or our customers aligns with kind of what they feel, our brand messaging, and you want to make sure that that copy's right. And so people like to specify and focus on that. You have to remember as well that if we tend to do too much, so you do have designers that might want to do researchers or researchers that know how to prototype and create designs, but sometimes when we're doing a lot of those jobs, it might mean that we're not able to kind of really give our full focus on one. And so it's always nice when you can have a full team that supports. It's nice for me that like I can kind of focus on my research, I can speak with the designer and also input in that stage as well. But they're the expert in that field when it comes to creating a design that I can put in front of a user to test. And so going back to the kind of highlighting skills in tech, you can almost understand why teamwork is such an important thing, and especially when it comes to problem solving. So I always talk about like the more heads, the better. When we really want to understand this a particular space, lots of different ideas in there is great. But just to finish off here, UX strategists. So they are kind of a bigger picture, might help a company with their direction, and then kind of input advice on how to pivot, position, or transition in order to reach that goal. And you might have, again, some people within there, so you can be a researcher that informs strategy. And then the UX manager might collectively look at kind of all those different roles in there, and they will typically, want to make sure that they're helping promote the value of UX to other teams of the business. So we can't, again, assume that everyone in the business is aware of what everyone does. And usually the larger the organization, the harder that is to do. So it's great when you can have, someone within the team, like the UX manager, who is making sure that they're in those conversations and they're maybe speaking to sales, for example, and how they can get value out of using our resources within the UX team, or aligning to help kind of their clients. So there's a number of ways of how different teams can work together, but essentially we do need to advocate for our users, but also advocate for our work, and so that people are fully aware of how thinking and reflecting about the needs of those they serve is only going to be beneficial to the business and everyone. So what I've got here is basically stages. So these 5 stages are a design process. So this is not isolated to a researcher. It's more about the design process, and within the process, it pretty much helps you understand how to kind of take a problem, how to break down the problem, and who might be needed in those different stages. So that first bit about like empathizing. So I'll give you kind of my typical day. I might have a product manager who really wants to maybe try and break into a new market, or is looking on how they increase engagement, for example, in a particular area of the website. But so you really want to start at the beginning. So, okay, let's understand where we are. And the empathizing is really understanding the problem. And so you want to look at maybe the research you've got. So we would do that, kind of do an audit of what we know today. You then maybe have to understand that actually, well, we have some gaps here, so we have to maybe do a bit more work. We might have to go and do some user interviews and kind of help define that space. And what we're doing is really just trying to get a really clear understanding of the problem here. Like, we need to understand the problem and our possible way forward. And when we go into ideate, it's the time of, okay, let's get the ideas in. You might want to invite more people into that session. Usually you would have your full team in there. So you've got your developers who are going to like build this after, you've got your UX designers. You mightn't have a researcher in there, but definitely the beginning phase. And then once you've kind of gone through your ideation, and that can be in different formats, so you have workshops, you've decided that these are kind of the solutions you want to try out, the designer would then take that away and start to think about how to put that together, so within a prototype. And the purpose of that prototype is, one, to kind of give everyone a visual sense of what that solution might look like. So it's the collection of all the ideas that you had in that session, based on a strong foundation, so which is the research that has been collected or that you've had before. And that last stage, bringing it back into the researcher's hands so they can kind of test that out. And the ways that we can test here would obviously depend on what we're trying to find out. Sometimes you might have your prototype and you want to sit with a user, whether it's moderated, which means that the researcher is in that session, can guide that session with that user, ask some questions. If it's unmoderated, then usually, they'll just see the prototype. Maybe there'll be some questions like laid out on the screen, but there'll be no one to kind of help them make sense of that or navigate that. And for a researcher, if we watch that back and there might be questions, it's obviously very hard for us because we can't go back. And so, the unmoderated, though it's quicker, obviously does have some disadvantages there. But whatever the way you've done that and you've been able to test it, for me, I will have to kind of sit back with those findings. And I have to, my aim here is like, how do I inform the team? Like, how do I make this digestible? And depending on kind of the type of it and how big it is, maybe I end up producing a report. Maybe I might produce some personas. Like, let me give you some examples of our users based on that work. Whatever I pick my output, again, it needs to fit kind of the scale of things, the goal here, the time frame. So sometimes, I've got these 5 stages. Not every problem goes through it. So we might already know a lot, and therefore we don't necessarily need to, go through like this empathize stage. This might be, we have something live, we just need to improve it. So we're going to ideate with some new ideas and then prototype. Or maybe actually we just want to try another idea. So we're going to prototype and then test. So depending on, again, the problem and all these variables that might be, that might come from the product manager. You might have to speak to the dev team to understand actually what some of their limitations are around the build function. You kind of take that back and say, oh, actually, if this is what we're working with, we're able to do this. So again, coming back to the teamwork, there is a lot that you have to consider before you can kind of run off and do your approach. And I'm just looking here because I've got a question here from John about what is the time frame from the empathize phase to the test phase? Which phase takes the highest amount of time? These are really good questions. Thanks, John, for asking. It is, again, really hard because it does depend on where you are and what type of problem. But you might, for example, in a design sprint, you might say, oh, actually, we're going to do this and have a 5-day, sprint. And so you might, for that first day, that's kind of focusing on, we're going to bring all the research together. We're going to really try and understand the problem. And then you're going to have maybe another day of, bringing all the ideas together. And so in something like that, that's, you don't often do like a design sprint like that with 5 days, because it is really intense, like to have a week like that. But it's done and it's doable. It again depends on the nature of the problem. I think the longest bit, or maybe kind of the bit that you want to all bring together, is probably around your like empathizing and defining, because you want to make sure that you've got everything you need so that everyone in the team can make an informed decision. And if you already kind of collect research on a regular basis and you feel like you know your users and this isn't necessarily a new market, maybe just a new product feature, then yeah, that's great. You can start with what you've got. But sometimes you do have to go back out into the world, as we say, and find those things out. And then that has a process in itself. You know, you've got to consider the time it might take to recruit the users in order to get that information. And so the more prepared we can be for this is, you know, the better. But it is, I definitely say, I think kind of your really time intense bit is the beginning bit, just because like everything stems from there. Yeah, and I guess once you move on, less people are required. So, you know, it's a designer that would be prototyping. We can't do anything until we've got those prototypes to test it with. So yeah, that would be my, I hope that answers your question, John. And yeah, and feel free to leave some questions in there and I will definitely get to them. Perfect. Okay. Right, just checking that everyone can still hear me. I've just lost the chat function, so I want to make...
That's fine. We can still hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so like I said, when it kind of comes back to like, you know, I've collected all the data as a researcher, and now it's like, how do I want to present this? What's the best output? Yeah, sometimes there is a report, you know, sometimes really quick, you know, here's what we've learned, here are the findings, here are my recommendations. So for your bigger pieces of work, and definitely where you're at that, you know, discovery stage, you might have something like this, and this is actually one of our examples that we use within the business of our personas. And what you can see here is kind of what we've got 5 characters, but the point of this is to bring all the information, and now you've outlined and you've seen your patterns, and now you're putting it in a way, a digestible way. So this is a visual presentation of our users, or some of them. This isn't our full list. And what we want to do is say to the business, we've seen these patterns in behavior, we've got these themes, and we've noticed that actually within our user group, here are some differences. We've labeled them up in a way where there's enough differences between them, but also when you want to go back to your particular product area, you can understand how you might change your product or alter your product to suit you know, the range of characteristics we have. And so this wouldn't just be, you know, you wouldn't just have this is like one page out of a document, which would probably go into depth about what their motivations are, what their behavior is like, what they're likely to use, their preferences. You would also include some of their pain points being kind of, you know, where they struggle. And that's really important for us because we want to, you know, provide a great user experience. So if we realize that actually for a changer, they really struggle kind of positioning themselves. They struggle making a decision because they're not too sure how to get that information. Then that's for us as an organization to address that problem. And you know, and that we'll have lots of ideas on how we best do that. But we need to understand what the pain point is in order to solve that problem. And I put this in here because I thought I think it's actually really fitting for just the world of work in general. And when you are thinking about, you know, okay, I need to find that next role, you know, where are you? And we do consider that, like, for a changer, which is my story, I did have this problem of how do I move into a field I don't know exists, or how do I take the skills I have and put it somewhere else. And I, you know, as teaching is a really rewarding career. And for me, it was really important that I did something that I felt, you know, I would have that kind of same contribution. I would be making an impact, um, and almost kind of leave the day feeling, you know, accomplished. But again, I didn't have that list of what to do. So it's nice to see that, like, as this, we understand that those are kind of some of the pain points that a changer would have, and within our products and our services, and how we engage and communicate with them on the site. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable enough to, one, give us the information to help them, you know, navigate the space. But yeah, it's really interesting to kind of capture that, and we see, like, the designers, for example, kind of take this and use this when they're thinking about, you know, their designs, or they're on another product area now, and they're thinking, well, I want to create this thing and I want it to be able to solve this goal, but how does that impact a traditionalist, and how is that different from a changer? What, you know, in what way would I have to position this so that it spoke to both these groups? And these are questions, these are really good questions to have, because it means before kind of putting pen to paper, there's a conversation, you know. And if you realize individually, so me being a designer realizes that I actually don't have those answers, then your next thing to do is to find out who might do. And maybe that is coming to a researcher. It might not be. It might be that actually what I need to do is go to the data analyst, you know, or a data scientist. But what it does require, that actually I understand that I've got resources within my organization, and there are other team members I can go to that can help me paint a bigger picture. And just on the topic of kind of this teamwork and kind of UX research as well, is that product managers, you know, will come to us to help them to understand that problem, and to think about kind of the ways they can go to solve that. But they're not just coming to us, and it's really important for us as researchers to align with the other kind of sources of information. So I work really closely with, like, our data analysts. I'm also doing a lot of work with the data scientists to validate kind of the things that I found out speaking to our different user groups. But, you know, I might have some limitations with the numbers that I can actually get to. So I'll maybe, again, look at the data analyst team and say, hey, do you have anything that supports some of these kind of observations that I've seen, patterns? And they'll go into, you know, whatever tool they're using, whether it's Adobe or something else, and they'll say, well, actually, we can look at this, and we can look at it in this way. And when I do maybe like my final report, or I do a session, I've actually considered a lot of different information points before I kind of present my findings, and that just helps. But, like, the product team have a really good measure of where to go, because they know that actually we haven't just considered maybe insights that have come from 5 users. For example, we have looked at kind of what's happening currently on our site. We're looking at the feedback we're getting from customer service, and we're considering what we're finding out from you know, the UX research team, whether that's with our users or you know, with people in the public. And that's kind of where you want to get to, and that's definitely our goal within our team. And I think it's a much more rewarding experience when you're able to do that. Just to note that I no longer can see the chat, so if questions are coming in, I'm unable to see them.
Sure, we'll make sure you'll get the questions. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, so this is...
Noman, you've got a question? No?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you have. Okay.
Hi, Tina.
Hiya.
Hi. So thank you for being with us today. My question is that, so the role business analysis and user research and product management, they have in some common, like if we create a Venn diagram, the user research is there between these roles, right? So as you mentioned also many times, product management. Is product management a natural progression after user research? That's one question. And how do you work with these two roles, like business analysis, in terms of like when they need to create B2B products, because business analysis, they all do recommendations. So digital business analysis, they will come up with new product developments. So for example, will they call you as well to assist them, or they do it by themselves, like the user stories, prototyping, testing, and all those stuff?
Yeah, thank you, Nama, for your question. Again, this is really valid, and I definitely can give you my example. So how I work with a product manager again, I'll have kind of an overall way of working, but again, there'll be like a personal relationship, and will differ depending on the product area they're responsible for. And maybe some other variables. But typically a product manager would come to me at that point of where they really just need some insights. So this could be like the next phase of their journey, and now they're working on a different product area, and they want to understand what that current landscape is. So I'll give you an example. I had a product manager who's kind of looking around how people use search, for example, and what are kind of some of those areas in. And they had, let's say, moved over like into this focus now. So they'll say, hey, do you have any information on this particular area? And I'll kind of go into my inventory and say, yes, this is what we know. This is kind of when we last conducted this study. And then I would get them to kind of refrain and reframe kind of what it is they're looking for. So what specifically are you trying to find out? And if I do have gaps in that, that's when I would then think about, okay, let me look into that and conduct something new. They would then take that same question and approach a data analyst. So the same question about I want to understand the behavior of search. And so the data analyst will look at it from a different perspective, not coming to me, but within their world. And just, as a business analyst, they have kind of their world of things. But this same question is going round to the different teams, because all of this has to come back to the product manager when they have to consider, okay, which way they go or what they want to focus on first. In the examples where I have worked with a business analyst, they've done something first. So, there's been a first point on their end, they've looked into something, and then they've kind of got their own study. And then they're at a particular point where, okay, for the product manager, before we go into like a workshop, I actually want to understand how what I have found supports kind of everything else. And so we will pair together, and I can say, okay, this is again what I'm noticing. So let's take the example of on a B2B where we're looking at our clients and their usage and kind of looking at new markets. So this is kind of like their external study, but this is what we've firsthand collected from recruiters. And we understand that these are kind of maybe the patterns within this industry, but we want to acquire something quite new. And we've done an external piece of research for not using the clients we have because this is a new market, and we're realizing these are the variables. We will then kind of compare and look at kind of what we have, but it's done independently. We only bring that together when we're trying to think about piecing the story together so that a PM can again decide which direction. Bearing in mind that the PM is deciding, but they're using our influence. So I will have my recommendation based on my data. Another source will have their recommendation. But the reason why we pair up before is because if there are any, let's say, differences, we can then kind of think about some of the assumptions we have. So why is it that we are seeing different things? What do we think might be behind that? What are the limitations as well of our own methods? Maybe it might be that on the analyst side, they're not tracking particular things, therefore they don't have that piece of their story. And I've got it from qualitative data because this is what the users are telling us they do or they use. Is that clearer?
Yes, that was a comprehensive answer. Thank you very much. And what would be your natural progression from where you are now?
So yeah, this question is definitely for, I guess, UX researchers an interesting one. And there's actually kind of a an open discussion across lands about, the different routes a researcher could go into. Again, I might decide that because I've been doing at managerial level a lot of strategy work, I might want to look into going into, strategy, and whether that's UX strategist or maybe looking at service design, which is really an end-to-end experience. That's something I might want to think about. What we're also seeing is that some people are finding that there's part of the researcher job that they prefer. So I might be a researcher, but actually what I really enjoy is the organization of things and like the tools we use and, arranging all of that. And so, research ops, that's another area that's kind of coming out of that. And if you're that way inclined and you kind of like those particular tools, then you might want to focus on that, because that is a real struggle for researchers. Like I spoke about recruitment before. It's almost like, having to make sure that you're getting the right users, making sure you have those screeners in place, assessing the third parties you might use to do that, all the tools that you're using to do that internally, where you store your data. So one of the big problems for product teams is making sure that they can find the data, like, it's easy to find that. And so as a researcher, you're like, well, what should our inventory be like? Or, where should that be? How should we store that? But, that's on top of the research you're collecting. It's on top of the analysis. So there are some organizations that have teams that, kind of are responsible for that. So it's, when you talk about, I don't think there is this kind of default progression. It's really like, where are your strengths? What's your interest? Where would you like to go? And then you kind of move into that way. And there are examples actually, even within our team, where someone has started as a product manager and gone into research because they might have done the part of research as that, as their role, and they really enjoyed it. And now they kind of retrain and go into that. I've seen kind of data analysts kind of go into different things. We've, even the route I've come into, I've got people on my team who have, who have come in from different backgrounds. So, and I think it's the same. And once you're in tech and you have a natural interest for something, you just follow it through. So yeah, there's not a one way, like a one size fits all. It's really just find what you like and kind of move in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. And one very last question, short one. Since we are all students here, mostly, someone willing to jump into UX research, from my understanding, is they can use design thinking, design sprint, user-centered design framework, to try out on few projects to show the employers their experience. Is there anything that you will add for newcomers into this field?
I think you kind of summed it up really well there, actually. I think, yeah, to show that you understand the design process, that you understand design thinking, that you are fully aware of like not only the different steps, but kind of how collaborating would come into play. And so I mean, I've had people, reach out to me on LinkedIn. And one of the things I do recommend is almost starting now. So if you can, even getting friends together and starting on projects and showing your process. So, if I'm looking at, if I'm interviewing now, one of the key things I'm really interested in is your process. So, like, how did you get to this destination of the problem solving? What were the steps in between? And sometimes I understand that, you don't have a team, so you're just, it's just going to be you, but it's still good to see like how you considered the needs of the users, how you framed it, why you decided to focus on a particular area, why that part of the journey, what did that mean? And then why you went into the solution you did. So, and I think it's that if you can kind of show not only that you're aware of the process, but like actually having a reason, like backing up your decisions, then I think that's definitely a good start.
Well, thank you very much, Tina. And thank you, Karine and Sue, for organizing the event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Tina, we have one more question from John Hoyes. Does your organisation use critical thinking when all the evidence is provided?
Does my organisation? So I mean, just thinking of the teams that I work for, yes, like, you know, I think there's definitely like a valid place to start and to consider. Like, I always talk about kind of making sure that we don't like go in with our, you know, we go in with our assumptions, but we don't leave with our assumptions. We also make sure that many people are invited into that discussion. So we almost say like it's a healthy challenge as well. You know, no one person's opinion is like above the others. We make sure that, and I think that's why having kind of the diversity in there, so that, like, you know, different minds is really important. There are kind of tools, you know, like strategies, especially in these workshops where people embed our hypotheses, and having those assumption workshops. I'm not too sure if people are familiar with that, but making sure that actually this is where we're going to start. Like, everyone's going to be open. Let's challenge where we think is healthy. Let's kind of do the assessment. And obviously different people, and I say, for me, when I think about my stakeholders, I realize that there are different agendas. So we don't all lean in from the same point of view. And that makes sense because, you know, we have different, you know, objectives or, you know, like metrics that we're using. But I think in terms of, you know, the thinking and the challenge and making sure that like everything has really been assessed. And so that, again, that solution or the decision we make is, you know, very informed. I don't work with everyone in my organization, but as from definitely as a tech organization, it's something we do embed. And there's lots of like innovation, even innovation days where we kind of try and apply like critical thinking and just more open challenges. I've kind of been involved in a lot of things that have definitely kind of just introduced me to a new way of doing things. And I always do try and take them back to like how I would apply them in my researcher world. So yeah, I think the larger your organization, like the more, you know, we've got Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, like running a lot of call sessions that kind of bring different people into the room. And that all helps. That all helps in developing your critical thinking. It helps your approach to a problem, and naturally problem solving as well.
Great, thank you.
So I did realize actually this wasn't didn't end on my last slide, but I mean, I'm not too sure where everyone is in the journey. But like I said, I spent a lot of time in the research around job seekers and you know what they look for, what's important to them, and also what the challenges are, where they struggle, where they would like more guidance. And because I'm a researcher who predominantly focuses on job seeker, I actually do have to kind of speak to recruiters as well, and I do have to consider what they look for and what's important to them in order to support job seekers better. And so when I was kind of putting my final words together, I did think of my own journey, but I actually thought about what I hear from recruiters and what I think might help job seekers just take away some of kind of that pressure. Because I do understand that, you know, you can apply and not hear things back, which we hear is kind of the biggest pain point because people don't know where they're going wrong, what to do, how to be better, how to stand out. And it's hard. So I think the first thing you have to do is almost like, you know, be your own coach. And I probably didn't know this at the time I was doing it, but definitely on reflection, I realized that the moves that I made, they were strategic. I'm probably a strategic person. And so when I know that, oh, I'm going to have to make a change, I just have to think about how I do that best because I don't necessarily want to lose out. And that was my thinking and teaching. So the place I always start with is with myself. And so I do that assessment. You know, where am I strongest at? Okay, like here are the skills. Where do I think I can use them? You know, what industries value these skills, and which of those industries do I feel like I could see myself in? But also I do the same on where do I need more support. I wasn't naturally someone that I would never have described myself as this data person of coming from this creative world, which is funny because in teaching we spend a lot of time with data. I was constantly assessing my students' needs, their progress. I was charting them. I was kind of making predictions. So I was doing it whether I was aware of it or not. But then, once you've got that kind of, you've done that assessment, you have to test and learn. And test and learn is a phrase we use in product. I'll extend that to tech. We have to try things out and see how it goes, and then, pivot where necessary. And I do that with my personal life. And I think it's actually something I would strongly recommend to everyone else. You've got to get your feet wet. You've got to know whether you like something or not, or which type of jobs suit you, and where you think you'd excel, but also be happy. Bear in mind, mental health is really important. So I think it's important that you do something that you enjoy. But if you don't enjoy it, don't worry. Change. Don't be afraid to pivot. I've done it enough times in my example, and it's always been for the better, even if it didn't feel like that at the time. Like when I left education, I was a bit anxious because you're going into the unknown, but I followed my gut. I wanted to be happy, and I did it, and it worked out for me. So, don't be afraid to pivot. And remember, even where you are right now, you've got a lot of skills. You've learned so much. You're doing a lot, and you can leverage those skills. So, make sure you illustrate them, make sure you show them, make them bold, let them be seen, because that's what's going to get you into, that new opportunity. That's what's going to open that door. But when you're in there, you still owe it to yourself to be open. So, develop new skills. And I think tech is great for that. You are exposed to so much, and there's lots of opportunities to work with different people and learn from them. And then that's pretty much what I've done to be at the point where I'm, managing a UX team, a user research team now. So start now, and keep on learning. And just remember that, like in tech, we are a bunch of problem solvers, and to find the best solution, we need variety, we need diversity. So there's a place for everyone. So I'd encourage you on your journeys, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Well, thank you very much, Tina. We do have one more question, and it's from Noman. Do UX researchers need to know about UI design?
No, you probably will find some job adverts out there that might request it, but no, I think it's always good to have kind of like the foundation. So, I understand what UI designers do. I understand the different elements that they might consider, but by no means am I an expert in it. It's not something I do. And that's why we have UI designers. So no, there isn't a requirement to know UI design, but it's really good to just have an understanding of what the different roles within UX do.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, that was absolutely fascinating. If everybody could switch on their microphones and give Tina a round of applause. That was great. And if anyone wants to reach out to Tina, she can be found on LinkedIn, if that's okay with you, Tina.
Yeah, please do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I really hope we will see all of you again next week. But again, thank you so much, Tina. It's been a really fascinating talk. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
And have a good afternoon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.